What was your first job? I'm here with my friend Brannon. You're going to find out what he does soon enough. But all of us had a first job on earth. I'm going to share mine in a second. But I want to ask my friend Brannon, what was your first job? How old were you? What was the job? And where did you work?
I feel like I've been working since I was about 8 years old. First job was mowing yards and washing cars in my neighborhood, trying to make a buck. And washing cars outside, mowing yards in Houston, Texas in the summer, you learn how to work hard and you learn that nothing's free. So my first official job though was sacking groceries.
Guys, I like both of those. I want to dig into both of those. The mowing of yards and washing cars, it's timeless, right? You could have been born in the 1980s or the 2010s. Do you remember what was the going rate when you were doing this for yards or cars by chance?
I want to say cars was like $5 to $10, and a yard was around $20. So a lot less expensive than it is today. That's for sure.
We got to catch that up. But when was this in the what decade was this in?
This was in like the late 80s. I was born in 80. So this
80,
would have been the late
77.
80s.
So we're the same. So we got to check on inflation. Now, tell me, before we get into sacking groceries, people say that people skills are really important. Get people skills, right? But they don't really give a lot of details. The yard mowing and the car washing, what people skills did you learn? Whether it was about sales, customer service, dealing with angry people, unrealistic expectations. How did that help you learn people skills?
I learned all of the above. I think confidence and not having a fear of rejection, right? I mean, I would just knock on all our neighbors' doors and ask if they had a car that needed to be washed, or, comment that I noticed their yard needed to be mowed. And, plenty of people would say no, but enough people would say yes that it would keep me busy. So I think more so than anything is just kind of being fearless, especially walking up to somebody's house and knocking on their door. That was a great lesson.
I love that. I mean, and a lot of things I am, going to tell mine in a second, but whether it's someone getting a dental implant, whether someone's selling their dental practice, whether it's someone hiring an associate, sometimes no just means not yet. So that yard may have to be mowed at a certain time. And also, I always tell people to be positive. The people helping that person who said no mow their yard, maybe they pack up their yard mowing company and get out of town, and there's an opening for Brannon and his solopreneur way. So I like that solopreneur way. But now I want to ask you, because this is important, you go to the grocery store. Now you're working for somebody else. Now you have to follow somebody else's rules. What did you learn from that in sort of being part of a team? You couldn't just do what you wanted to. You couldn't just, hey, if it was slow, you could just go home and play video games like Nintendo that we played back then. Tell me about how that differed, the sacking of the groceries, working for someone else.
Yeah, I mean, working for somebody else, you definitely kind of had to fall in line, right? And learn how to follow rules. I think I learned early on in that initial job that I didn't do great working for somebody else, that I needed to be an entrepreneur and eventually needed to have my own business. Whether that was conscious or subconscious at the time, I definitely knew that I didn't want to work for somebody else for the rest of my life.
I love that. Love that story. Thanks for sharing. I'll share mine quickly. My real first job was being a bus person at a truck stop diner at 16 years old, and I learned a lot about how different customers in the same place could act wildly different. I could have very kind customers who thank me, and then I could have people who hold their coffee cup over their head to signal that they wanted more coffee and wouldn't put it down and give me an angry look. So I believe working in the restaurant industry, I did that for 10 full years, taught me. I went from server, bus person, lead server, fine dining, really taught me how to connect with people, how to deal with objections, how to talk to patients. So I just think those are really key. Well, I appreciate you sharing. I always think it's very interesting to learn about people's first job. Now I want to move into your now job. So tell our audience, you're an awesome Nacho sponsor. We've had a chance to connect in person. What do you do to help dentists regularly? What is your role in this wild and wacky dentisting world?
Yeah, so my firm, McLerran Associates, we specialize in providing sell-side advisory for practice owners that are looking to affiliate with a DSO, partner with private equity, or sell in a more traditional sense to a private buyer. So day in, day out, really What I say is our job is to educate and empower dentists to make good choices with their practice. Good choices around, when it's time to sell, controlling the narrative regarding EBITDA, practice value, making sure we find a buyer that's the right fit, find a deal structure that's the right fit, and really just, educate and protect people. Make sure that they're making good decisions with one of their most valuable assets that is obviously economically impactful, but, you know, selling somebody's practice is a very emotional process.
Yeah.
Obviously it's financially impactful, but it's very emotionally impactful. A lot of dentists have a lot of their personal identity tied up in their practice, and you know, if it goes well, it's very satisfying. If it goes poorly, I mean, it's a major disruption, emotionally and
I
financially.
love that. I also want to share, I'm making these shirts. I want to get you on biceps and EBITDA because I saw you at the gym at Dykema. So I know you like both. It's what you think about here. They are on sale at the Nacho's website. I want to dig into this Nacho play a little because it's so key. I talk about the 4 big decisions: finding a job, buying or starting a practice, hiring your first associate, and then selling your only practice. And I think what's important is let's start at the end and go backwards. Most of your clients, do they only do this once, right? It's a once thing. Most of your clients, are they only oncing this, right? Where it's whether they have 3 practices, 5 practices, 1 giant practice. I just want my audience to know this is a one-time decision for most of your clients. Would you say yes?
For the vast majority of our clients, it's a one-time decision. They've owned only one practice, whether that be a single site office or a multi-site office, whether that be a single doctor practice or a multi-doctor practice. They typically only do it once. We have a handful that are very entrepreneurial that will, buy or start a practice or a group of practices, sell it, and then do it again. But the vast majority of our clients, this is a one-time decision in their career.
And I appreciate you outlining that because I like people to. But my guess is the people who might do it more than once, their first ones went pretty well for them, or their first ones they made good decisions that they wanted to get. My assumption is if people make a terrible decision with this once thing, it might not put them in the position to do it as many times again. Is that accurate? Or if I'm not accurate, you could tell me.
No, if you screw up the first one, you're not going to have the opportunity to do it again. Whether you choose to do it again, or whether a bank's willing to lend you the money to do it again, right? So you got to do the first one right in order to move on to the second one.
Also, I'm talking with Brannon Moncrief, awesome Nacho sponsor here, on talking about my first job and his now job, helping dentists make the best decisions about selling their practice. You said something I say a lot. My job is to make dentists aware, prepared, and responsibly concerned, which is another word for scared. Aware, prepared, and scared. So now let's go into this, just helping my audience learn this difference. And I've been a Seinfeld fan, so he used to say, what's the deal with this? But I also was a huge Friends fan. Matthew Perry sadly passed away recently, and his phrase, could you be more this? So could you be more into EBITDA, Brannon? I don't know. Tell us the difference between selling to a private practice and a DSO. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm Dr. Guac. I got a $1.6 million practice. It's got 6 operatories. I'm 54 years old. And I just say, Brannon, my friends have been telling me about selling my practice. I'm on a consult call with you. Just tell me the main difference between selling to a private practice or DSO.
Yeah. So a few primary differences. If you're selling in a traditional sale to a private buyer, you're not typically going to be required to stay on long-term post-close, typically a short-term transition post-close, if not a walk-away sale. And you're typically going to receive 100% cash at close. So it's a very, very clean deal structure, typically a short-term transition. And then economically, the practice is likely going to trade for somewhere in the range of 70 to 100% of annual revenue. Now, conversely, in a DSO transaction.
Well, I'm going to keep my audience. Yeah. I like to explain it. So I'm going to say I got a $1.6 million practice, and it's reasonable if it's a good practice for me to get $1.3 million, stay on for something that feels like 6 months to help the person, and then Uber off into the sunset, never having to go back to my practice, but also really never being able to go back to my practice because now there's a new owner there. So I got $1.3 million. I save for 6 months. and I just get to finish. So that's private practice. Now walk us down I'm like, hey, Brandon, that sounds good, but I want to know my other options.
Yeah, so similar, let's say it's the same practice, same scenario. In a DSO transaction, you're typically going to be required to stay on post-close for 3 to 5 years. And that doesn't necessarily mean you working chair side. You can step away from the chair. It just means that you have some sort of vested interest, likely some sort of holding company equity or retained equity at the practice level, long-term post-close. So most DSO transactions are going to involve a component of cash at close, somewhere in the range of, let's say, 60 to 70% of the value of the practice, and then some sort of equity component, whether that be joint venture, retained equity, or holding company equity. So a much more complicated deal structure, less cash at close than a private sale, and an ongoing post-closing commitment that will span 3 to 5 years. And then when we talk economically, you said in a private buyer sale, you might get 1.3 million, cash for that $1.6 million revenue practice. In the DSO world, the valuation is going to be a function of a multiple of EBITDA. And let's say your EBITDA is 400,000, a 25% margin on that $1.6 million in revenue. If you trade for, let's call it 7 times EBITDA, you're selling your practice for a valuation of 2.8 million. So, double in the DSO world from a valuation perspective.
And in the JBR world,
the private
in the JBR
world.
just be real world, we're back to my scenario. I'm going to get more cash at close, even if I get 50%, right? Even if I keep 50% in, and that could be on the low side. So I got 1.4 million. And then I take that other 1.4 million and put it into this investment thingy, right? I want to dumb it down. Investment thingy. I know second bite of apple, third bite of apple, but just so my audience understands and my team, but I have to play along to get more, right? I have to continue to play along and be part of that team. I want to ask you a question because you're so involved in this space. And just yesterday on one of my Dentist Job Connect interviews, we were interviewing the director of operations for a DSO who needs an associate dentist because their owner's about to retire. And she even said, he's well past retirement age, okay? So he's been hanging on to keep his practice functional, even though he sold to a DSO. So my question for you is it important for you to know how good the DSO is at hiring associate dentists before you jump in? Because it might sound all well and good that you can drop the handpiece in 3 years, but this is your practice. These are your people. Tell me about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it's critical to understand, especially if your goal is to step away from the chair, in the short term, right? We have a lot of clients that go down the DSO path that they're willing to have a vested interest in the practice for 5 years to achieve that higher valuation, but they don't want to work chairside for 5 years. They may plan to step away chairside within a year or two. So making sure that the DSO that you're considering partnering with has a robust recruiting function from the ability not only to recruit associate doctors, but staff as well, and also retain those associate doctors is critical. I will tell you that DSOs understand that doctor turnover is their Achilles heel, right? Without the doctors, you can't be successful. So when a DSO is formed, one of the first centralized departments that they build out is their HR department, which involves doctor recruiting and staff recruiting. So if you're going to scale a DSO, you've got to have the ability to recruit, onboard, and retain associate doctors, but they're not all created equal. So, asking the DSO. I want to
ask you, so what's your favorite sport, Brannon?
Favorite sport? The one I play a lot is golf.
Golf, okay. Well, we could go Ryder Cup. Do you watch any football or basketball on TV?
Yeah, I watch a ton of college football.
So we just placed an associate dentist with a DSO that placed 35 implants in his AGD, and he produced and collected $100,000 his first month there. We also placed a D4 dental student with the same group who barely broke $30,000 because he's only done a handful of crown preps. So these draft picks, and I know we run Dentist Job Connect. We have DSOs, solo practices, dentistjobconnect.com, but it's important that they know how to hire the right replacement for you, the right replacement quarterback. Because if you took me, Brannon, and put me in a dental office in Texas that I don't know any of the patients, I could be a dentist for 20 years. It's hard for me to keep up the same production as the previous dentist. And just so I'm telling the story right, if the previous owner has a vested interest in that practice doing well, he's got to make sure his legacy practice still makes money. Is that an accurate way to put it?
Yeah, absolutely. He's got to make sure that the associate that's being recruited has the capability to mirror his skill set and production. Otherwise that practice is going to take a big hit. And conversely, if the doctor that's stepping away from the chair has a limited skill set, or is not a huge producer, recruiting an associate that has an expanded skill set that can place implants and do ortho and do endo, that's probably going to cause the practice to grow and is going to further enhance the value, any retained equity value that doctor has in the practice.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you outlining this. As we wrap up, tell us what's you see happening in the next 6 months in your space. It's just an evergreen question. DSOs don't want to buy as many practices, valuations going down, valuations going up. We watch College Game Day. I watch ESPN. People are constantly prognosticating from their seat of expertise. Doesn't mean they have a crystal ball, but from what you're doing and what you're seeing, what do you think people should be paying attention to over the next 6 months?
Yeah, so from a private buyer, that more traditional practice sale perspective, supply has been strong, demand has been strong, interest rates are higher, but that market's kind of an equilibrium. It's not really a seller's market, not really a buyer's market. We really haven't seen a marked change in that side of the space. And that side of the space has been rock solid and pretty steady, pretty stable, for 20, 30 years. So we're not expecting any remarkable changes in the more, doctor to doctor practice transition world. But in the DSO space, there has been significant movement over the past 12 months. Private equity is driving the consolidation of the dental industry. They count on leverage. They count on bank money in order to drive growth and drive acquisitions. Interest rates have gone up faster in the past 12 months as they have in the history of the country. And the capital markets are really tight. It's harder to get access to debt. So as a result, you've got some DSOs that are on the sidelines. They don't have money. They're not bidding on practices. They're waiting to take on a new lending relationship or recapitalize and get a new financial partner. Some DSOs have grown extremely rapidly coming out of COVID and are over their skis operationally or having to take a pause to catch up from an infrastructure and operational perspective. So you've got, probably a third of the DSO buyers out there on hold. The good news is, though, that void has been filled by younger emerging DSOs that have recently taken on private equity capital that still have plenty of access to leverage. So as a result, there's been a lot of supply, a lot of doctors looking to affiliate with DSOs. There's been a little drop in demand, which has caused valuations to really kind of plateau. Valuations were increasing drastically over the past few years coming out of COVID, which was great for large practice owners and for sellers. Valuations have recently plateaued in some areas of the country. They've cooled off and declined slightly, maybe a half turn of EBITDA. What we've really seen is, on transactions, on practices where we would have seen, 15, 20 bids a year or two ago. Now maybe we only see 5 or 7 bids. Gotcha. The valuations are still steady, but we're not seeing as many bids. There just aren't as many buyers in the marketplace. We thought 23 was going to be a really challenging year. We thought valuations could come down as much as a turn or two of EBITDA. That has not been the case. We're optimistic that 24 will hold steady. And then hopefully with the election cycle, with inflation cooling off, we're hoping by mid-year interest rates will start to creep back down. The capital markets will open back up. The DSOs that have been on pause will get right-sized operationally or will find new financial partners, and the market will rip again like it did post-COVID. So we're optimistic about the future. There's been a little bit of headaches and change in the DSO world from an acquisitory standpoint over the past 6 to 12 months. That'll probably permeate another 6 to 12 months. But man, the activity level's been super high. So awesome. Our business has performed well, and we're still accomplishing, great results for our clients.
Great recap, to use a DSO term, of what's happening. I have your image on the screen. This is designed to be listened to, so people can text McLerran, McLerran, to 215-543-6454, or reach out to us at dentistjobconnect.com to meet Brannon. But basically, people should reach out to you before they make any big decisions with selling their practice? Is they should reach out to you? Do you do complimentary calls? Do you just chat with them? Do you tell them, hey, it's not the right time? Is that the audience that should be reaching out to McLerran Associates?
Anybody with a large practice is likely being solicited on a daily basis by DSOs, trying to convince them to sell their office, do a deal in the dark, not have proper representation, yes, not create optionality, not create competition for their practice. So anybody that's got a practice doing 1.5 million or higher, you're likely receiving those solicitations. Call us before you make a decision. We'll do a complimentary discovery call just to get to know you, talk about your practice, and figure out, are you a fit? Does it make sense to lean into this and look further at the DSO option? And if so, let's do an IBIT analysis. Let's do evaluation. Let's establish a relationship and decide, does it make sense to go down the DSO path? If so, when is now the right time? Or does it make sense to wait a couple of years? And if you're going to pull the trigger and go to market, let's run a formal blind bid process. Let's bring you multiple offers. Let's bring you optionality. Let's create leverage to make sure that you maximize your outcome from the sale. Because like you said, Paul, you only get the opportunity to do this once. So you got to do it right.
I love that. Well, thanks for supporting us as a sponsor. Hope to see you in person soon. If people need an associate, one or more, just text HIRE to 215-798-9897 or reach out to us at dentistjobconnect.com. Thanks so much, Brannon.
Good to see you, Paul. Thanks for having me.